They sent it to the whole family, except me. I was in my office in downtown Seattle when the email hit my inbox. Subject line, Winter Escape, Final Details. It was from my cousin Renee, the usual organizer of the Whitaker family's annual ski trip. I clicked out of reflex, my mind already assuming it was just another update. But halfway through the email, my stomach dropped. I scrolled down the guest list, Beth and Greg, the boys, Aunt Carla and Uncle Dave, Mom. Even Renee's college roommate was on there. Everyone was accounted for, except me. My name wasn't there. I sat still for a moment, blinking at the screen. A soft ping from Slack came in, something about a thermal fatigue report for the booster casing. I ignored it. My hand hovered over the mouse before I opened a new tab and typed in the name of the lodge in McCall, Idaho. Stone Pine Hill Lodge. I knew it by heart. We'd gone there almost every winter since I was a kid. I remember falling asleep in the loft while my uncles played guitar downstairs. I remember cinnamon rolls in the morning, snowball fights that ended in tears and laughter, and watching Beth parade around in her new ski gear like it was a fashion show. Now I wasn't even invited. I hit enter and the lodge's website came up. Nothing unusual on the front page. But when I clicked through to the contact tab, something caught my eye. A tiny line of text tucked below the banner. This property is currently for sale. Please contact Macon Valley Realty for inquiries. I stared at it, rereading it 3 times to be sure. They were selling the lodge, and no one had said a word. I leaned back in my chair, the skyline of Seattle stretching behind me. Through the floor-to-ceiling window, I could see the bay, the cranes, the layered chaos of the waterfront. I should have gone back to work. My calendar was blocked out with meetings, design reviews, budget approvals, vendor check-ins. But I couldn't look away from the screen. They were selling it. Selling the one place that actually felt like it belonged to all of us. And they weren't telling me. I should have closed the tab and moved on. I should have shrugged it off like I had the last few years, when they forgot to include me in the family photo album, or when my birthday card arrived 3 weeks late, unsigned. But this felt different. This was deliberate. I clicked over to Macon Valley Realty's site, found the listing. It wasn't even public. Private sale only, inquiries by phone or private login, which meant they knew. And they were keeping it quiet. I closed the laptop slowly and stared out at the city, my reflection barely visible in the glass. I looked tired. My blazer was sharp, my heels expensive. My name still carried weight in the engineering world. But in that moment, I felt like I was 10 years old again, standing in the snow watching the others laugh without me. And I knew this wasn't just an oversight. It was something else. It was erasure, quiet, careful, decades in the making. I reached into my desk drawer, pulled out the old compass my father gave me when I started college. I hadn't touched it in years, but it still pointed north, just like always. They thought I wasn't paying attention. They were wrong. It didn't start with the ski lodge. I wish I could say this was a sudden betrayal, something clean and sharp and recent. But the truth is, it had been happening for years. Quietly, like a slow leak behind a wall you don't notice until the damage is permanent. It started small, a text I was never copied on, a family Zoom call where the link must have gotten lost. No one said I wasn't invited. They just didn't mention it at all. I used to fight it. I used to send messages, check in, double confirm plans. Hey, are we still doing Christmas Eve at Aunt Carla's? Are the boys playing in that hockey tournament this weekend? Most of the time, I got no reply. Sometimes Beth would send a thumbs up or a vague, "Oh, we're just keeping it small this year." Eventually, I stopped asking, but I never stopped watching. My sister Beth was always the social one, the connector. Loud, warm, strategic. She curated our family like she curated her Instagram, bright and filtered, always performing. She hosted holidays, planned game nights, even organized a surprise birthday dinner for our mom at a vineyard last year. I found out about that one through a tagged photo. Everyone was there, cousins, neighbors, her Pilates instructor. Everyone but me. I remember that dinner because I sent Mom a necklace that morning. Overnighted it. Silver pendant with an etched pine tree. Our dad used to say we were all rooted in the same forest, even when our branches grew apart. I thought she'd like the symbolism. She never mentioned it. I used to wonder if I was imagining it, if I was reading too much into things. Maybe I was the one pulling away. Maybe I'd changed. Seattle had a way of making you a little colder. Too many rainy mornings. Too many hours in a conference room. But then I'd see the photos. Cropped just so. A family picture with me edited out, literally once. I'd taken the photo, and Beth posted it later, my half of the couch conveniently missing. That was the year I stopped sending Christmas gifts. But not because I stopped caring. That was the year I started saving everything. Emails, text, voicemails. Some came from Paige. Paige had been my friend since high school, back when we were the only two girls in AP Physics. She stayed in town, became a paralegal, married a kind guy who fixes HVACs. She's never once missed my birthday. And sometimes she'd forward me things. Messages she'd get from Beth. Or group threads I wasn't in. Thought you should see this, she'd write. No commentary, just receipts. And there it was. Beth, joking about how I'd probably be too serious for the trip. My aunt saying I probably wouldn't ski anyway. My mother saying nothing at all. Silence is a funny thing. It doesn't scream. It erases. And I was starting to realize just how far gone I was from their picture, but not from the truth. That I kept. Every word, every omission. They thought I wasn't looking, but I was. And I always had been. I started with the property records. There was no emotional logic left to lean on, so I leaned on the cold, boring kind. County records, business registries, tax filings. My day job required me to work with suppliers across 3 continents. I could read a legal document in my sleep. And this was personal. It didn't take long to find the paper trail. Stone Pine Hill Lodge, once listed under our father's name, had been transferred into a holding company, Wintermere Holdings, LLC. Quietly, no public announcement, no family discussion. Just a string of filings made 2 months after our father passed. Registered agent Beth Whitaker, of course. She'd always had a flair for performance. I should have known she wouldn't just sell the lodge outright. No, she wrapped it in an LLC, tucked it away behind a mailing address, and a low-rent lawyer who probably had no idea he was enabling the slow erasure of someone's daughter. I called Paige. "Do you have time for a favor?" I asked. "For you?" "Always," she said, then lowered her voice. "You thinking what I'm thinking?" "I'm thinking our dear sister may have gotten sloppy." Within hours, she had the full title search in my inbox, along with something else, something I hadn't expected. A clause. It was buried in the trust, one our father had drawn up just a year before he died. Paige found it listed under succession protections in the property appendix. If the lodge entered delinquency, failure to insure, failure to maintain tax status, the primary beneficiary named in the protective clause could claim legal interest, pending verification. The name listed, Darla Whitaker. Me. I sat still at my kitchen table, reading it over again and again. The language was clear. Our father had built that clause himself, probably late at night in the study when the house was quiet. He was a structural engineer before he retired. He believed in contingencies, and apparently, he believed in me. "Paige," I said, calling her back, "can you check the insurance records?" She had them within the hour. The policy had lapsed. No renewal since last year. And the property taxes? Unpaid, 2 quarters in a row. "Beth's sloppy," Paige said. She probably figured no one would notice, but technically, you can claim it. "I'm going to need a second opinion." I emailed the documents to a friend of mine, Elena, a property attorney I worked with on a lunar habitat project 2 years ago. She reviewed the clause, then called me from DC and said, "You'd win this in court, easy, but if you want to move quietly, you could just file the forms and let them come to you." I didn't answer right away. Instead, I opened the old wooden box where I kept the compass my father gave me when I was 15. The glass was cracked, but it still spun and settled. Always north. I placed the papers beside it. For a long time, I'd let myself believe they could take everything and I'd survive just by staying quiet. Not anymore. Now it was my turn to move. Precise, quiet, legal. I printed the forms, signed them in black ink, let them find out the hard way. I wasn't out of the picture. I was claiming what was mine. The clerk didn't even blink when I booked it. "Entire property?" she asked over the phone, typing briskly. "Yes. Master suite, west wing, full kitchen access. And I'd like the fireplace set before sunset." "Understood." Name on the reservation? D. Whitaker. There was a pause, then a click of confirmation keys. It's all yours, Ms. Whitaker. Anything else? A bottle of Grand Cordon in the fridge, chilled. And privacy, please. I don't want staff disturbing me unless requested. Noted. I hung up and looked out the window. Rain tapped against the glass, steady and light. Seattle's usual mood. I stood, stretched my legs, and closed my laptop. The paperwork was filed. The ownership transfer was recorded. The trust clause had triggered quietly, like a buried wire someone forgot to mark. Stone Pine Hill Lodge was mine now. I drove to Idaho alone, 8 hours of highway in silence, cutting east through pale fog and low clouds. I arrived the night before they were supposed to. The lodge looked almost exactly the same. The hand-carved sign still swung gently above the main entrance. The porch creaked just like it used to. Inside, the place smelled like pine and dust and a bit of something burnt. Probably the chimney flue hadn't been cleaned in a while. The old piano was still there, tucked into the corner of the den. The firewood stack looked low. Minor neglect, nothing too far gone. I walked through the room slowly, like I was tiptoeing through a memory. The master suite upstairs still had the wooden compass above the headboard. I smiled when I saw it. I unpacked quietly, then checked with the front desk to make sure the reservation reflected my updates. 1 guest, no add-ons, full access. They nodded and marked it in the system. Private retreat. No other bookings allowed during stay. Reserved by D. Whitaker. The next morning, I parked my car down the road, out of view. It wasn't petty. It was precise. I watched from the overlook just above the driveway, where you could see the front entrance clearly. Around noon, the first SUV pulled up. Beth, of course, in her bright red parka and shiny designer boots. Greg followed, lugging skis. Then came our mother, stepping out of the passenger side in her usual cream coat, adjusting her scarf like she was on stage. They walked in, cheerful and loud. I imagined the front desk clerk scanning the reservation, then frowning. No, I'm sorry. This weekend the property is reserved entirely for Ms. D. Whitaker. I saw Beth's face change through the front window. Confusion, a pause, then her voice, sharp and rising. Greg looked stunned. Mom blinked, already flustered. That's when I walked up the path, slow and deliberate. The front door opened as I approached. The clerk stood awkwardly in the doorway, eyes wide. I believe there's some confusion, Beth was saying. This is our annual booking. You must have the name wrong. You don't, I said calmly, stepping forward. They all turned. It's reserved under my name, I added, handing the clerk my ID. I'm D. Whitaker. Silence. Beth's jaw clenched. What are you doing here? I looked at her evenly. I own it now. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Mom's hand went to her chest. I filed under the trust clause, I continued, due to unpaid taxes, lapsed insurance, and total disregard for the agreement our father left behind. You can't just... I did. The clerk looked at me, then back at Beth. We're not authorized to allow anyone else on the property during the reserved period, she said, voice careful. I'm very sorry. Beth looked like she wanted to argue, but she couldn't find the angle. I turned to the clerk. Can you bring the champagne to the study and please lock the front door behind them? Yes, ma'am. And just like that, they were outside again, confused and quiet. Their trip slipping away like snow on the deck railing. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't gloat. I just walked back into my lodge and let the silence do the talking. The news broke the next morning. I was sitting on the lodge balcony with a mug of coffee, watching the snow drift in slow circles, when my phone buzzed. Subject line, engineer uses legal loophole to seize family lodge. It was a local broadcast from Boise, the kind of news station that still had a blue backdrop and a weatherman named Chuck. But the story had already made it to Twitter. They'd used a picture of me from a university keynote I gave 2 years ago. Blazer, hair pinned back, smiling like I had no idea the world was about to make me a headline. The anchor's voice was flat. Darla Whitaker, a Seattle-based aerospace engineer, quietly filed a trust clause to take ownership of her late father's ski lodge in McCall. The property, long held by the Whitaker family, was used annually for large family gatherings, until now. Sources close to the family claim the move was cold, calculated, and unfair. I knew who the source was before they even added the next part. Beth Whitaker, the eldest daughter, alleges that their father was in cognitive decline when the trust was drafted. He was vulnerable, she says, and we were misled. Misled. I sat back in the deck chair and let the snow fall around me. The silence of the mountains felt like armor. By noon, my inbox was on fire. Journalists, bloggers, college classmates I hadn't heard from in years. My phone buzzed nonstop. Is it true? Can we get a quote? Do you regret what you did? I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I called Paige. She picked up on the second ring. Saw the news. Beth's running scared. She's not subtle, I said. No, but we are, Paige replied. I've got the whole archive ready. The messages, the threads, even the video. I went still. You're sure it's clear? Crystal, she said. He's sitting on the balcony. You can hear the snow melting off the railing. He says your name 3 times. I opened the video on my laptop. It was dated from the winter before he passed. He looked frail, his shoulders smaller than I remembered. The blanket bunched up around his chest, but his voice was still steady. She's the only one who listens, he said, squinting off toward the trees. Beth talks a lot. Darla listens. She remembers what matters. That's the difference. I want her to have this place. He paused to catch his breath. It's hers, even if they don't like it. I closed the laptop slowly, the knot in my chest softening for the first time in days. Beth had tried to rewrite the story. She'd leaned on that old family script, paint Darla as distant, ungrateful, too successful for her own good. She'd fed it to the media with that same performative charm she'd always used to win over the room. But this wasn't a room. This was evidence. And I wasn't a ghost anymore. I texted Paige. Send the full archive to my lawyer. Include the video. Let them go public if Beth escalates. Done. I walked through the lodge, checking windows, tightening a loose bolt on the staircase railing. I paused by the family wall, the old photo display that used to hang by the fireplace. The hooks were still there. The frames were gone. I didn't need them. I had the video. I had the truth. I had my father's words. Beth wanted a fight. She was about to learn I didn't need to yell to be heard. All I had to do was press play. The courthouse in Valley County was smaller than I remembered. No marble columns, no grand doors, just a plain brick building with a pine tree out front and a sign that still had snow crusted around the edges. Inside, it smelled like dry heat and old paper. I walked in alone, navy blue dress, hair pinned, folder in hand. I didn't bring a lawyer. I didn't need to. My lawyer had filed all the documentation in advance. Today was about presence, about letting them look me in the eye while the truth unfolded. Beth arrived 5 minutes later, flanked by a suited man with too much gel in his hair and a tablet he kept thumbing through like he was waiting for it to tell him the ending. Our mother came in just behind them, wrapped in a wool coat with pearls at her throat and eyes that never once met mine. The judge, a man named Kern, with a gray beard and a voice like gravel, called the session to order. Beth's lawyer started with the performance I expected. She'd been estranged, he said. The family hadn't heard from her in years. The clause was obscure, exploitative, buried in language no average person would notice. And most importantly, he said, their father hadn't been of sound mind when he wrote it. Ms. Whitaker, the lawyer said, turning to me like he was inviting me to confess. Surely you must understand how aggressive this all looks. I stood. I understand exactly how it looks, I said calmly, which is why I brought evidence. The judge raised a brow. Proceed. I opened the folder. One by one, I laid them on the table. Certified property records showing tax delinquency. Lapsed insurance. Correspondence from Beth, ignoring maintenance requirements. The video was last. I handed over a USB. On this, I said, is a recording of our father, sitting on the lodge balcony, naming me as the rightful heir. In his own voice, by his own words, the clerk plugged it in. The room fell silent. And then he spoke. Beth talks a lot. Darla listens. My mother shifted. Beth stiffened. The lawyer tried to speak, but the judge held up a hand. Let it play. It ran for 1 minute and 47 seconds. No dramatic editing, no special lighting. Just our father speaking plainly, clearly about what mattered to him. When it ended, the room stayed quiet. Judge Kern tapped his pen against the desk. Once, twice. Then he looked up. The clause is enforceable, he said. The supporting documentation is sufficient, and the decedent's intent is clear. Beth opened her mouth, but he didn't stop. This court does not resolve feelings, he said, with a dry finality that left no room for argument. We resolve facts, and the facts are not in your favor. He turned to me. Ms. Whitaker, the lodge is yours under the terms of the trust. This case is closed. He gavelled once, and just like that, it was over. Beth stared at the desk in front of her like the wood might offer an appeal. Our mother rose slowly, her hands tight around her purse. Still, she wouldn't look at me. I gathered the folder and walked out without a word. They had tried to paint me out of the family, but it turns out facts have better memory than people. And this time, the silence wasn't mine to carry. Outside the courthouse, the reporters waited like crows. They called out questions as I stepped down the stone steps. What did the ruling mean? Was I proud of what I'd done? How did I feel now that the lodge was legally mine? I didn't flinch. I just walked past them, slow and even, my boots crunching over a thin sheet of morning frost. One of them, a woman in a red scarf, jogged up beside me and lowered her mic. Ms. Whitaker, do you have anything you want to say to your family? I paused. Then I looked at her and said simply, no. I said it already, just in quieter words. She blinked. I kept walking. That evening, I drove straight back to the lodge. The key turned easily in the lock, the door opening to still air and faint pine scent. The place was just as I'd left it, quiet, sturdy, familiar. I moved slowly through each room, not like an owner inspecting a prize, but like someone remembering how to live in her own skin. I checked the hall closet, made a note to replace the broken umbrella stand, ran my hand along the windowsill in the sunroom, and felt the dust on my fingertips. In the study, I found the old compass again. I hadn't put it there. It was wrapped in a faded cloth, tucked into the drawer where my father kept spare light bulbs and a small rusted multi-tool. I held it in my palm. The needle still spun a moment before settling, as if even now it had to think about the direction. North, still north. I stood for a long while, just holding it. Then came the soft knock on the door. It was Paige, holding a grocery bag in one arm and a bottle of wine in the other. Got your text, she said with a grin. Figured you could use some carbs and company. Come in, I said, stepping aside. We made pasta, the cheap kind, boiled in a dented pot that still sat under the counter. She brought her Bluetooth speaker and queued up one of our old playlists, Van Morrison, A Little Feist, a cover of Fleetwood Mac that made us both sing without realizing it. After dinner, we cleaned. Not because we had to, but because it felt good to do something simple. She washed, I dried. We opened the windows even though it was cold and let the crisp air in. Before she left, I reached into a drawer near the entryway and pulled out the small wind chime I'd fixed last year. It was made from broken bits, a spoon, a flattened washer, a brass ring with half its polish gone. I hung it outside the study window. It clinked softly in the wind, shy at first, but steady. Paige looked at it, then at me. You staying a while? I nodded. This wasn't revenge. It wasn't victory. It was reclamation. In silence, in motion, in memory. This lodge wasn't just mine because of a ruling. It was mine because I had always been the one paying attention. And now, I was ready to stay. That night, we sat on the wooden deck wrapped in blankets, the world quiet except for the wind and the steady rhythm of snow falling through trees. Paige poured the wine into enamel mugs. No stemware, no pretense. Just warmth between our hands and the sky above us shifting from lavender to deep slate. The kind of sky you could fall into if you stared long enough. Neither of us said much for a while. The silence didn't feel empty. It felt earned. Finally, she glanced over. So, what now? I took a sip, watching a pine branch sway under the weight of fresh snow. I don't know, I said, but I don't think I ever really left. Paige tilted her head. You mean the lodge? Number. Them. I looked out across the property, where the edge of the trees met the soft outline of the frozen lake. I tried so hard to stay part of something that didn't want me. Tried to make myself smaller to fit the version of me they could tolerate. She didn't interrupt, just waited. And then I realized, I said quietly, it's not that they didn't see me. It's that they chose not to. The wind chime outside the study rang, faint, irregular, almost like a heartbeat. I leaned back in the chair, legs tucked under the blanket, wine warming my throat. Paige nudged my shoulder. They'll come back around, eventually. Maybe, I said. But that's not why I did it. Why did you? I thought for a long time before answering. Because I was here all along. I just stopped waiting for them to notice. The stars had started coming out by then, faint, scattered, just beginning to peek through the clouds. I could see the trailhead from the corner of the deck, could imagine the morning frost, the soft crunch of boots, the hush of trees covered in white. No parades, no confrontation, no grand finale, just this. A lodge left standing, a wind chime singing, the kind of silence that says, I'm here. Paige smiled at me over her mug. The sea stays, she said softly. I smiled back. Yeah, I whispered. It does.